All right. Hello. My name is Nathan Simmons, and with my co-host Nathan Kwan, we host Two Nates on Sports. And with us today, we have a special guest, Evan Tenenbaum, our resident MLB expert, here to talk about a very specific event that happened this week, the winter meetings. You ready to dive right in?
Yep, pretty much. What's going on, guys? Sorry I'm not a Nathan, but hopefully I can make up for it by
Too late, man.
my
You had to
baseball
start.
analysis.
Ah.
All right, so talk about the baseball winter meetings. Just happened this past week. A lot of different trades, a lot of different free agent signings going on. Probably the most important are the highlight deal that go on in the MLB. Chris Sale is no longer a Chicago White Sox. He is now on the Boston Red Sox. The Boston Red Sox pulling the big deal and signing Chris Sale, or trading for Chris Sale for 4 different prospects that they have in their organization: Yoan Moncada, Michael Kopech, Luis Basabe, and Victor Diaz. So we can talk about that starting off. Nathan, what are your preliminary thoughts on that? On the White Sox side, getting all these good prospects and Red Sox getting, probably one of the best pitchers in the American League.
Which Nathan?
Either one.
I guess I'll start. This is a win-win trade for both teams. The White Sox get Yoan Moncada, who's arguably the best pitching prospect in all of baseball right now, as well as a really strong hitting prospect that the name escapes me right now, but I remember reading up on him, and he was, I believe, the rated fourth overall in the Red Sox system by MLB. So it's a very strong trade for on the White Sox end, and on the Red Sox end, it just feels unfair because it just feels like the rich getting richer in sort of this weirdly incestuous trade between two Sox. But basically, they now have Chris Sale, who arguably could have been the Cy Young Award winner last year. They have Rick Porcello, who was the Cy Young winner this past year, and they have David Price on their team too, who's a former Cy Young winner, and they have David Wright, not David Wright or Daniel Wright. Stephen Wright, who is pitching real well in the first half, but kind of faded away a bit in the second half. But he still has to be like the fourth pitcher in that rotation. To have someone like Stephen Wright is pretty darn good in my opinion. What about you, Nathan Kwan?
Yes, so I guess the two big teams, I guess, this offseason are the Red Sox and the Astros in terms of the American League. Boston gets, again, more pitching for its rotation to add to that outstanding offense with Xander Bogaerts, Mookie Betts. I guess Chicago White Sox are in a rebuilding mode. They figured out they couldn't really build a team that would contend within the next couple of years, and they cut their losses now. And they also, I guess, dumped Adam Eaton to the Washington Nationals. There's been talk on they're looking to trade Jose Quintana as well, and so it's a complete rebuild on the south side of Chicago.
Oh yeah, Chicago is. They picked the absolute right time. This is perhaps one of the worst starting pitching markets and free agents that I've seen in quite a while. The fact of the matter is, like, you're looking at what's left now. Like, you're looking at back of the rotation guys that will be getting at least 3 years minimum on their contracts. So at least their agents are going to be looking at, their AAVs are going to go off the roof. You don't want to necessarily pay too much in free agent signings for starting pitching. So you're going to look towards trades. And that's what a lot of teams that are looking for starting pitching are doing. And they're giving up big prices for for these pitchers. So you got Chris Sale, who netted 4 really good prospects. Then you got Adam Eaton, who was 2 or 3 really good prospects out of the Nats organization. And I remember reading some article the other day, Jose Quintana, and the White Sox GM is basically saying that Quintana's value is pretty much at Chris Sale's value. Obviously, he's not as good as a pitcher as Chris Sale, but it's definitely a seller's market right now for traded starting pitching that's going to be better than what you can get as a regular free agent. And it's a little scary thinking about that. If you're a team that's looking for starting pitching, the Rangers are definitely one of those teams that's looking for starting pitching. They just or before the winter meetings, they signed Andrew Kashner to a $11.5 million 1-year deal. So you can't say that a 1-year deal is necessarily a bad thing, but it's still kind of iffy coming from a player like Andrew Kashner. Now, a lot in the Rangers camp were saying like Derek Holland. We had that $11.5 million. I think it was $11 million or $11.5 million. He had an option on his next year, and we ended up buying him out for it and became a free agent. He's one of those pitchers that you can get on the free agent market just by itself. But a lot of people were saying, like, well, would it have been better to just pick up the option for Derek Holland instead of signing Kashner for pretty much equitable value? It's hard to say. Is Kashner a better player than Holland? Maybe, maybe not. Holland hasn't really necessarily been consistent since 2013. He's been hurt for the past 3 years. He had a decent showing in 2014 when he came back from his surgery. He wasn't so good this year and in 2015. But I guess Kashner, at least in John Daniels' eyes, looks better than in Derek Holland's position than re-signing Derek Holland. Anyway, the point is you're looking at a really weak free agent signing for starting pitching, and you have to look towards trades, and you're paying the big price and prospects to do that. And Chicago White Sox took big advantage by doing that. And I'm telling you, in 2 or 3 years, they will be a really scary team.
Oh, absolutely.
The market for pitching is, especially as you mentioned, the starting pitching, but also the relievers are getting paid. It seems Aroldis Chapman signing back with the Yankees with a 5-year, $86 million deal, which is nuts. And they're saying the Marlins were actually involved in that, in driving that price upward. Kenley Jansen is still out there, and I guess people are thinking he's going to go back to the Dodgers, but you have Mark Melancon getting a $62 million deal from the Giants. And then the Cubs, the world champs, getting Wade Davis, Jorge Soler from the Kansas City Royals. So that very interesting trade. The Cubs, I guess, losing Chapman and jettison one of their outfielders who has real promise to get that back end of the bullpen reliever.
Oh yeah, definitely. Relief pitching is. I feel like relief pitching is a little bit more volatile than starting pitching. You got to look at. I don't know. It's just. I mean, Aroldis Chapman is the best relief pitcher probably in the Major League Baseball right now, and I don't see a problem with the Yankees signing him for such an exuberant contract. Other than the fact is, I don't necessarily think the Yankees are the front runners in the AL East at this point. It's definitely the Red Sox with their boisterous rotation. And I think the Yankees are kind of doing that thing with what they kind of always do is they're going to be above 500 team and maybe compete for a wild card. But I mean, Aroldis Chapman definitely helps them on the back end, having Dylan Betances still there. I was trying to think who else they were trying to go for, but yeah, Aroldis Chapman, I dig that signing. And then I guess Jansen hasn't really signed yet. I think he fits with the Dodgers. Obviously, his contract's going to go up, and the Dodgers can pay it. So I don't really see a fault with that. Mark Melancon, the Giants picked a good reliever. The only thing that I have going with Mark Melancon really is he's kind of getting up in age. Mark Melancon's 31, 32, something like 31. A 4-year contract isn't a big deal. But in a volatile relief pitching, it's kind of a volatile position. By the time he's 34, he could potentially be out of the league. He won't even get a good contract. He may be out of the league by then. Now, I'm trying to think of some other examples, like at least on the Rangers. they necessarily don't shell out for relief pitching in the free agent market. You look at what they currently got. Their closer Sam Dyson, who we got in a trade for two no-name prospects in 2015. Now,
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily call Sam Dyson the best reliever. I think he's a solid reliever, and in positionally, he probably fits the mold of a setup guy. He has a really good sinker. He can get ground balls, but he's not necessarily a strikeout guy. That's kind of what you want in a closer. And you look at the rest of the Rangers relief squad. You got Matt Bush, who is a strikeout guy. You got Keone Akela, who's kind of wild, but he does do strikeouts. Jake Diekman, who I'm not so tight on anymore. He has a really high walk rate, and so they got a bunch of these guys that like you would necessarily
as well
call
as Jeremy Jeffress as well, who's had closing experience before, but he has terrible splits.
Oh yeah, it's definitely. So basically, what the Rangers are doing, and I've seen a bunch of other teams do. I think the Royals did this a couple years ago. They have like what would you just call ragtag, but it's low contract relief guys who, are good at doing their one thing, is getting strikeouts or lowering walk rates and not giving up home runs or things like that. They have a really low shelf life. I think of it as a bad example. You use up all of their good talent, and then they get their contract, and they start to suck. You look at Sean Tollison, who kind of did that with the Rangers. He had 2 really good years with the Rangers, and last year he lost his closing job, and he actually got outrighted at the end of the year, and he has no job right now, and I doubt he's going to get any good contracts in the free agent market, other than maybe like a minor league spring training kind of invitation. So yeah, I just the way I just see relief pitching contracts go in the free agent market is I'm not necessarily sure if they're worth what exactly they're going to get paid for. A lot of the benchmarks is you get $7 to $8 million per WAR that you're worth, wins above replacement. So, and I'm trying to say, so like Craig Kimbrell, who is on a $13 million per year salary with the Red Sox right now. Last year in 2016, he was worth about 1 WAR. That doesn't sound like someone who's, if you're going to go for the $7 to $8 million argument, he may be a little bit overpaid, and which is saying something because Craig Kimbrell used to be one of the best relief pitchers in the league. Mm-hmm. So you can kind of see that curve kind of coming with relief pitchers, that they have about 3 or 4 really good seasons early in their career while they're in pre-ARB or in ARB, and then they hit the free agent market, and it's not necessarily that they're playing to what they're worth, but they've been in the league for so long that hitters can kind of come back and make adjustments, and so they're not as effective. Now, obviously, Mariano Rivera is probably the biggest exception to that, but
he's a Hall of Famer, so
yeah, you got to be a Hall of Famer to really go against that. So that's what really concerns me with the relief pitching market. Other than that, I know people are trying to. The teams are trying to shore up their pitching, and that's what the free agent market does. You got to pay the ultimate price in some of these things, and whether they work out or not, we'll see how that goes.
Moving on closer to home, one of the stunning signings I saw this past week was the Rangers weren't able to re-sign Ian Desmond, and he signs with the Rockies for 5 years, $70 million. And that was actually, when I saw that, I was really surprised because based on the year he had in Texas on that 1 year, $8 million deal, and he turned into an all-star player, gold glove or silver slugger caliber. And I guess he just goes for the money in Colorado.
Okay, so here's how I can explain that. Ian Desmond had a really good May and a really good June and an okay July. And hold on, I'm pulling up my numbers. I have a little spreadsheet. After the All-Star break, hold on one sec. After the All-Star break, Ian Desmond was not the same hitter that he was at the beginning of the year. He slashed 237, 283, 347 in the second half of the season. That for an everyday starting outfielder who we signed That's not going to cut it. And that's at the second half of the year. That's not necessarily a 5-year contract worth. So I think what in John Daniels' head was, if we can get someone to sign, I guess that 10 million, 11 million, around that exuberant contract for a 1 year, maybe a 2-year contract to kind of bridge the gap, that can play at a value equal, maybe a little bit better than Ian Desmond did in the second half, then it'd be worth it. And so what they did was they re-signed Carlos Gomez, a 1-year contract. What was it, $10 million, $10.5 million, something like that.
I think it was 11, like 11 and a half. Yeah.
Yeah, they all kind of edge around when the $10, $11 million. So if you look at Carlos Gomez's splits while he was with the Rangers, he was definitely pulling out something that Ian Desmond was not pulling out in the second half of the season. And I think John Daniels recognized that as something he'd rather venture for than re-signing Ian Desmond. Now, I'm not trying to crap on Ian Desmond here. I think Ian Desmond did a good job in rebuilding his value after turning down that 7-year, $107 million extension that the Nationals gave him a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he got a pretty lucrative contract in Colorado. I think reading something, it's the highest contract, or the biggest contract that Colorado's given out to an outfielder in its team history.
Wow.
So good for Desmond on that. But I think the Rangers were not gonna shell that out, especially with the giant contract that they have given to Shin-Soo Choo. He's still got 4 years on that. Elvis Andrus, who, by the way, is actually earning his contract. If you look at his wins above replacement value, he had his best offensive season of his career. So, but he's still got a giant contract left on the table. And then you got And then you got Prince Fielder, who's going to be making $36 million for the next 4 years, doing nothing because he's hurt. Poor guy, but you still got to understand that in the payroll, it's a business. You got to understand you can't spend that money elsewhere. So they weren't going to necessarily be exuberant about going for Ian Desmond, especially with the second half that he had. Colorado was willing to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
do you guys
at the end of the day,
Prince Fielder trade?
What?
Do you guys regret that Prince Fielder trade looking back?
Not necessarily. It's easy to say. Hindsight would tell you. So, like, if you look at again, I'm going to use the wins above replacement argument again. Ian Kinsler has been very, very good the past 3 years. I think he's racked up about 14 or 15 WAR in the past 3 years. Gold Glove defense, a couple All-Star appearances, and Prince Fielder had 1 good year. So it's in hindsight, you could say that we could regret that. Obviously, it opens up the opportunity for players like Jerkson Profar and Rougned Odor to get their shot. Yeah. So, and you can look at raw numbers that would say that Rougned Odor is improving, other than his exuberant strikeout rate, which I really wish he would commentate or to Cole and learn to take a couple walks and things like that. And if he can learn to do that, then maybe the Fielder Kinsler trade could have been worth it. Who knows? I just know that back then it's a calculated risk to see 2 aging players, which one will deteriorate first, and apparently Fielder did. Okay.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And also, it's just I like we definitely have the depth to replace Ian, but also on the same side, like who else in the Rangers system could we have used at that time to replicate the same production as someone like Fielder, like a power hitter? Like, we had Joey Gallo, but Joey Gallo was so far out from producing at all. And even then, that was still not really a guarantee. Like, we traded for them in 2013, I believe, and so it wasn't until 2014 that Joey Gallo sort of started living up to sort of that potential as a prospect within the prospect system. So back then, we didn't really have anyone that could have possibly contributed in the same way that Prince Fielder hypothetically would have. But yeah, again, like at the end of the day, like I don't have a problem with it in terms of the logic that went into it. It was a good process, but it ended up getting a really bad result. Like it just the risk that they took did not pay off. But that's just
Definitely.
that's how not only just sports but business in general goes. Like sometimes
Oh,
you
yeah.
take a risk and it backfires on you, and you end up losing nine million a year at the very least for the next 4 years. But
Okay.
that's how life is.
Let
Yeah,
me
go ahead.
finish up with a couple more winter meeting stuff that may be of value. Um, we could talk about a couple of their different players. Mitch Moreland signed a contract with the Sox, 1 year, $5.5 million. It's a good defensive gap for the Red Sox. I don't honestly think he'll contribute much in offense, but they have the offense really. Honestly, I wish the Rangers would have signed him for that value for a $5.5 million contract because that's basically our value. And then other things, Rich Hill got a 3-year, $48 million contract with the Dodgers. Very good for him. He was an independent league player for the longest time. He's an old dude. You got to do what you got to do, and then he gets this pretty good contract with the Dodgers. I don't think he's worth the value, but again, it's the Dodgers. They're willing to part with that money. And then Koji Uehara signs with the Cubs. He could potentially be the guy that replaces Chapman on the closer role. I know they have a couple good other relievers on that squad that could also do that. And then we got to talk about Encarnacion, who I think has probably the worst agent. Because you get this offer from the Blue Jays at the beginning of the offseason, 4 years, $80 million, which is not a bad contract for, I guess, a guy worth Encarnacion's value. But he rejected it, wanted to see how the market played out. That's kind of what we want to do. And then his price just kept going down and down and down. And now we're outside the winter meetings, and he still hasn't signed with anybody. And I don't know where he's going to go. I know that the Rangers say that they're not going to push out that money so they can get a everyday first baseman. For that, I'd probably be willing to go about 3 years, maybe $50 million on him, maybe. But there are other teams that are vying for it, and they're kind of showing their hand and then pulling back, and no one knows where Encarnacion's going to go.
Yeah. Well, yeah. At this point, people are trying to see like how low the money can go until they can get it, because they clearly can see that there's not really that big of a bidding war on Encarnacion at the moment. I mean, maybe they're banking on it, like as teams start getting a bit more desperate for at least a big signing or a big bat, to see if maybe there becomes a feeding frenzy then. But for the time being, it looks like the teams are just trying to wait out and see how low Encarnacion is willing to go before trying to make a serious offer.
Mm-hmm. And I think he's, at least in the first baseman market, I think he's the first domino, because you got obviously Steve Pearce just got a signing by the Blue Jays, so it looks like they may pass on Encarnacion. Mike Napoli's still waiting to hear back. And then a couple other the players that really depend on how Encarnacion sets the value, at least at first base. So that'll be interesting in the next, I guess, month or two before spring training starts to see. All right. Well, we talked a lot of winter meetings, I guess. Are there any other players that you wanted to discuss regarding all that?
Is there anyone that wants to talk about any of the rumors coming about, and any thoughts on possible Jose Quintana rumors about him possibly heading to the Astros? Or do you think the Astros should try participating in the trade market, or is that just they should, like, after all the big signings that they've gotten, that they should just say that they're happy and head out towards spring training?
Yeah, let me take that. I mean, as an Astros fan, I think the majority of us do want to see a starting pitching, whether through trade or free agency. I think that was the Achilles heel of the team last year, was when you lost Dallas Keuchel and Lance McCullers. The rotation really struggled down the stretch run last year. But I think that the hope is that if you don't want to give up a big name prospect like an Alex Bregman or even anybody who's on the verge of making it to the majors. And so I think Jeff Luhnow, the GM, is content with the team that he has right now. You hope Dallas Keuchel has a bounce back season. Lance McCullers is healthy. You hope Joe Musgrove, who came up at the end of last year and showed pretty good signs of being a back end of the rotation starting pitcher. And then you hope that bullpen was one of the top in the majors last year. You hope that bullpen with Ken Giles having a bounce back year is good as well. And obviously you also hope that the offense, Josh Reddick, Brian McCann trade, that you get a lot more from the offense, that the team is a little more balanced. And so, I would like to see, I would have wanted to see Chris Sale, but I think most Astros fans wouldn't have wanted to give up an Alex Bregman, be a all-star in this league for years to come to get that. And I think that, as Evan mentioned at the beginning, the price of these starting pitching is just really high right now, just because there's not much on the free agent market.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I think the Rangers were originally interested in Quintana themselves, but after seeing the White Sox GM come out and saying that he's basically be worth what Sale's worth, they really don't have the prospects anymore to try and compete in that. You have Joey Gallo, but no, his value's just gone so much lower ever since he entered the majors and strikes out about 40% of the time. And then you have basically no good pitching prospects anymore that at least available within the next year or two to make it to the MLB. And then I don't know, it's just that value for Quintana is so high right now that I don't think that the Rangers are going to buy it, and they're going to try and work internally to fill that fifth rotation spot. Now, funny enough, the Rangers selected what's the guy's name? Michael Housechild from the Astros in the Rule 5 draft, and he's going to get a shot. Do you have any information on Housechild?
Not at the moment, unfortunately. But I think we got to start moving on to the NFL at this point. But let's move on to talking about this past weekend, specifically the Houston Texans playing in a blizzard. Thoughts on that, Nathan?
Yeah, that was wonderful. It's always nice to see a winter game. The snow is falling, the wind is blowing, and you're inside your house warm, just watching them out there. No, it was a brutal game offensively again. And the Brock Osweiler actually didn't have too bad a game, but the offense just really couldn't get going. They had really one good drive the whole game, and it was in the third quarter, where they were able to get into the end zone with a gutsy 4th and 1 call, where they threw it to the tight end. But the offensive lines really struggled this game. The running game couldn't get going. Lamar Miller, who's been banged up, he didn't have a good game. And Bill O'Brien, I guess his offense just continues to not be able to move the ball. The conditions weren't good this game, and I think Green Bay had a pretty good game plan. They loaded the box and pretty much dared Brock Osweiler to beat them down the field. And I will say the play calling was kind of really conservative for the most part. And I think it helped out Brock a bit, and he didn't turn the ball over. But I just think this team is going nowhere, and I think that's what most of us fans feel is the level of enthusiasm for the team is not very high. You have the owner who's just, he came out and made comments about, like, don't criticize Brock, like Brock is not the problem. I just think, like, Bob McNair, while he'll forever get a pass because he brought the NFL back to Houston, his reign as an owner has not been produced much of anything at all. And I think fans just want change. No matter what happens the rest of the year, there's not a lot of confidence in the fan base that anything's going to change anytime soon. The only time he's changed coaches is after 2-14, where he basically has had to make change. You've had a GM who's who's been mediocre and who's held the job for 9 years now and has produced bad draft after bad draft, bad free agent signing after bad free agent signing. And so
there's going to have to be a shakeup soon with that Texans organization, because they're just, at this point, they're spinning the wheels and like wasting the years of J.J. Watt and
DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've
especially
seen it. Brian Cushing's career, Andre Johnson. There's been a lot of good players that have come through here. It's just they've never been able to put everything together. And I think that comes with personnel. I mean, you got to have depth on these teams, and the depth is built through the draft. And if you go back and look at drafts from 2011, 2012, you look at those middle round picks, and you wouldn't recognize any of those players because some of them didn't even make the team, and then the ones that did got hurt or had very limited impact. And so it's tough. We have a big game coming up this week against the Colts. It's basically AFC South is between three teams: the Texans, the Colts, and the Titans.
All at 6-6.
Yeah, best division in football year after year. And
reminds me of those years when the NFC East was, the winner was a 9-7, and then the loser was the Cowboys. That 8-8.
Yeah.
So yeah. I of those three teams, it's kind of hard to really see who would pull out and eventually be the winner. And that, obviously, I think the Texans may have the easiest path. They have a tough game against the Colts, and then they have 2 home games against the Jags, the terrible Jags and the not so terrible but still pretty bad Bengals. And then they get the Titans. So they have the easiest path. But Andrew Luck is basically plowing through this last couple games and carrying the team on his back and just kicking the ass of their own defense. And the Titans are kind of playing balance, but it's the Titans. So I still foresee the Texans winning that division. It's gonna be an ugly next 4 weeks of attrition, but yeah.
Honestly, I at this point, before I thought the Texans would still make it through just because of how mediocre the rest of the teams were. But honestly, I would say the Texans are looking, not the Texans, the Titans are looking more and more like the likely winners of the AFC South, just because they have a great offense with Marcus Mariota leading the charge, as well as Murray basically returning back to his 2014 form. And having a strong offensive line with great rookie performance from Jack Conklin. And then on the defensive side, while their secondary is really not that good, they have one of the better pass rushing duos in Brian Orapko, and the other guy is escaping my mind. I think it's Murray. It's driving me up the wall, but basically they can rush the passer, and when you rush the passer, you're able to at the very least generate turnovers from either like sacking the quarterback, causing a fumble, or putting pressure on the quarterback and forcing him to throw poorly and maybe get an interception that way. They're looking more and more like the very possible favorite, especially if it comes down to the very last week and the game between the Texans and the Titans is the AFC South, ends up being the AFC South championship game.
Yeah, I will say Tennessee has a really tough schedule going in. They have Denver this week at home, and Denver's in that fight in the AFC West with 3 outstanding teams. Then they go to Kansas City, same team, same deal. Kansas City is first in the AFC after winning on Thursday night. At Jacksonville should be a win, and then the Texans week 17. So we'll see if they're still in it. I think it's going to be tough for them these next 2 weeks. Indy's schedule. They have the Texans this week. They're at Minnesota, at Oakland. So those are 2 pretty tough road games. Minnesota is desperate for wins in the NFC North, and then Jacksonville week 17 for the Colts. So
I can easily foresee all 3 teams, or at least 2 of the teams, being tied after the end of week 17, and then tiebreakers will decide the division.
Yeah,
definitely.
And then the winner will have to play someone really difficult either Oakland or Kansas City or Denver, one of those AFC West teams, or maybe even the Dolphins. Who knows? They'll have a very tough road team to play in the first round of the playoffs. And if I were one of those AFC West teams, I would be wanting to play someone, whoever the winner of the AFC South is.
Oh, for sure. It's
sure, yeah.
All the teams are flawed. I mean, to be honest, none of these teams deserves to make it to the playoffs, but that's the system we have. So we'll see what happens. I'm not taking the Texans. I'll take the Colts. I don't think Andrew Luck, the way he played Monday night, it was scary. And but we'll see. I guess moving on, the NFC East has a very big game this week. The Cowboys on the road at the Giants. The Cowboys' only loss of the season was week 1 against the Giants, but that was Dak Prescott's first NFL start, and the game was actually a really good game. It went down to the wire. But some are picking this week the Cowboys to lose. It's on the road in the cold in New York, but it also could be a revenge game. So what are y'all's thoughts?
I believe that the Cowboys actually are going to win this game for one big reason, and that's John Paul Pierre is not going to be playing this game and is very likely is already been considered out for the rest of the regular season. But the big thing about that is that now our weakest person on the offensive line, Doug Free, does not have to go against arguably one of the best defensive ends so far this season. And so because of that, I'm not that worried about Dak Prescott being hit on his blind spot or not noticing at all a loose pass rusher that got by Doug Free. So I think more than likely the Cowboys will still win this game, especially since, as you pointed out, it's basically a revenge game for them, and they want to show how much they've improved since the first game of this season. So that they have that going in for them, as well as I think our defense is. It's not going to. While I don't want to completely dismiss a team that has Odell Beckham, I will say they're not going to be facing that big a challenge in with the offense that the New York Giants has, specifically Eli Manning. What are your thoughts, Evan?
I kind of agree with, at least on your defensive side. I think JPP being out is a big help for the Cowboys, at least on Doug Free's case, and giving Dak Prescott a little bit more time to throw. He obviously struggled against the Vikings, probably one of the best defenses in the league. So that's the thing about Dak Prescott. He's excelled in those games where he's been able to make just the right pass or just the right run for a first down, just in time kind of thing, for against defenses that are really good. And then can also win those shootouts against pretty crappy defenses like the Redskins or like the
Steelers
Browns.
in a way.
So I would agree with you. On the other hand, the Giants have some devil magic in them that when it comes down to the line, when you have that perfect season to ruin, that they do it. When they have a 13-3 season in 2007, they can, even though we beat them twice, they can ruin that too in the playoffs. When they have, basically, I think Eli Manning is a cult leader, and he does some voodoo magic spell. And when the time comes, when they're desperate, they get him and they lead the charge. And I think being in New York this week, being in the cold, I guess this is the real first cold experience that Dak Prescott, as a Mississippi State guy, would probably have. So it'll be interesting to see how he adjusts to that. But I actually do think the Giants will win this week, stay alive at least in the division race for another week or so. I still think the division's going to the Cowboys. But yeah, we'll have to see.
Well, to keep up the whole occult theme, just to play devil's advocate, could it be possible to say that the Giants technically already ruined our perfect season by beating us in the first game?
I don't think it was the Giants that ruined our perfect season. It was Terrence Williams that ruined our perfect season, but that's just my opinion.
No, I'm talking about this season. I'm talking about this season, though.
I am talking about this season.
Oh, okay.
Wow, Cowboys fans talking about perfect seasons, getting a little cocky over there, huh?
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
might as well at this
after
point.
so many
When you're
years of-
already the best team.
And after so many years of 8-8, and then you end up getting a 12-4, and then the next season you get a 4-12, so it comes to 8-8 anyway. You know, you kind of get that mediocrity train, so you'll take what you can get at this point.
You know, I don't want to jinx
Absolutely.
y'all, but I will say it's a Texans fan's worst nightmare is if the Super Bowl, which is in Houston this year, is the Dallas Cowboys against the Oakland Raiders, where the Oakland Raiders have Derek Carr and what's his
Khalil Mack.
Khalil Mack, yes. Where they could have had him a couple of years ago. That would be our worst nightmare. But the long way to go before we get there.
Like
it would be an
Raiders are the-
interesting.
Go ahead.
It'd be an interesting ladder, at least, to get to the Super Bowl. I think what the Cowboys want to look at, in their placement, at least in the playoffs, is they do want to secure home field advantage. They do not want to play Seattle Seahawks in Seattle if they are given the opportunity. Probably the hardest team that they would maybe face in the playoffs would be the Redskins, even though they already beat them twice. But Kirk Cousins is the Andrew Luck of the NFC, essentially. So they don't want to face that kind of player in the playoffs. So they want to be wary of the Redskins. They want to be wary of the Seahawks. Other than that, they don't have much of a barrier to the Super Bowl. But it'll be interesting to see how they get placed. They're probably going to get the first round bye. It'll be interesting to see who they get in that divisional round. At least to get past there and to get to their first NFC championship game, the first one in 20 whatever years it is, whatever years it's been. So yeah.
I will bring up this other thing, the NFL MVP race right now. Very interesting because you have Derek Carr, you have Tom Brady, obviously. Some will say Matthew Stafford has had a really good season for the Lions.
And Matt Ryan was almost running away with it at the beginning, but has sort of like cooled off since then.
Yeah. And then you have the two Cowboys. You have Ezekiel Elliott and Dak Prescott. And so it'd be very interesting to see if the Cowboys have a chance, because one would think they would split the votes there.
I think that's basically their only downfall, so they'll get split votes. And I don't even know who to say from the two of them who would be the rookie of the year. So, and that's in the own personal Dallas Cowboys fandom. Like, I can't tell if Ezekiel better, is Prescott better. Like, who do I like more? You know.
Yeah. Well, maybe the best way to solve that is to give one the MVP and one rookie of the year. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Possibly.
Yeah. But I guess moving on to the NBA, so my Houston Rockets are on fire. They had a perfect week, beating the Celtics, the Lakers, and last night in Oklahoma City. They also had a bit of drama this week. Donatas Motiejunas, who's a 7-foot power forward, he's been unsigned throughout this past offseason. Basically, he was a restricted free agent, and we gave him an offer sheet, which he refused, and he was looking for a multi-year deal from another team. Except there was no other team that wanted him to a multi-year deal given his health concerns. And so he basically waited it out. He finally got assigned an offer with the Nets this past week. And so the Rockets have, with their right as a restricted free agent, they matched the offer. And so it was like, this drama's finally over. He's going to come help the team be that low post scoring option. And then Monday rolls around and he doesn't show up to his physical. And then his agent, the brilliant BJ Armstrong, he comes out and makes a statement that said, we're not going to report. We have our rights. And so I'm going to presume BJ Armstrong as an agent knows what he's doing, but he had no rights. And so we had this 3-day stalemate where we weren't, basically, as a restricted free agent, he had no rights. He either could report to the Rockets or he was not going to be able to play in the NBA until he worked out something with the Rockets, because we had his rights. And so in the end, they restructured a deal. It was basically the same deal, but it was very incentive laden for the Rockets. And so Daryl Morey basically checkmated BJ Armstrong, and Demo's going to return and all is well. But I just thought that was amazing drama for an agent to come out and say we have our rights, when basically, I mean, the only thing he could have done really was go to Europe and maybe teams would see how well he did there, and maybe he'd get another deal from another team. But that was amazing drama. As far as your Mavs, they got a big win last night against the Pacers.
Yeah, the only win this week. Yeah,
weekly win
against the Pacers. I mean Wesley Matthews and Harrison Barnes have somehow teamed up to play not bad, and have actually been performing pretty well this week, given everything. All things considered. Dwight Powell has been performing somewhat coming off the bench. But I mean, at the end of the day, I'm just happy for the one win. Didn't watch it because I just assumed they would lose, but they won. I mean, at the end of the day, I think the bigger question still going forward is that, like, earlier this week they had this like a 30 to 40 minute long team meeting in which they were apparently very angry that they were losing all the time. And there was an interview with Wesley Matthews after the Kings game, and he seemed actually very dejected about how bad this team was playing, and it sort of came across as a little bit of a shock to me, in so much that was just, well, I'm not surprised that these guys have this, like, they want to win, they want to be winners, because all they've known for most of their pretty much a lot of their careers is winning. That they want to still continue that, even though, like, very, very clearly, from as a long-term Mavs fan, very clearly this is far and away one of the worst squads that has been assembled in gosh, however long I've been following this team. So I'm just sort of I'm surprised that they're trying to, that they really are committing to not tanking and trying to be a good team, even though it's, at this point, it's looking very likely there's really no chance for them to make it to the playoffs, unless they go on some sort of miracle run, which I've seen stranger things in the NBA, but, like, that's with this amount of talent on this team, I don't see that happening. And honestly, like, they could do a lot worse than getting a top pick in this year's draft, specifically getting someone like a Markelle Fultz or Lonzo Ball, or even someone like a Josh Jackson or Jonathan Isaac. But what are your thoughts, Evan? Just to quickly touch on this, do you think they should try tanking, committing to tanking, or just trying to win as many games as they can, in spite of the lack of talent on this roster?
I'm trying to think of it in the casual NBA fans' point of view. Me personally, I have not been watching many Mavs games in the last few years. My current cable provider blacks out all the Mavs games, so I can't even watch them anyway. So that's a little problem. The way I see it as a casual NBA fan's point of view is this is a losing team right now. The only draw for a casual fan is Dirk Nowitzki. If you're going to go to games, Dirk Nowitzki is the big name profile. Now, he's not the best player. He's not even a good player anymore, but he still puts butts in seats. And,
he's a future Hall of Famer.
Is a future Hall of Famer. He's the guy that you're going to want. So what if I were Dallas, I would understand that this is a lost cause season. You want to make up all those draft picks that you lost in the Rajon Rondo trade a couple years ago.
Yeah. Or pretty much almost all the trades in the past 5 to 10 years in a way.
Yeah. So I would just rip the Band-Aid off now. Understand that this is a lost cause season. Hopefully get a good lottery position, get good draft picks. And then play Dirk out next year with grace and responsibility. Mm-hmm. And understand that this is an end of an era. This is the 2000s, early 2010s era where the Mavs were very competitive. They had a winning record every single year from 2000 all the way up to, I guess, last year, or a tied record. Yeah. I guess that one lockout year.
Yeah, the one lockout year that they had a tied record, but even then they kind of went on a slight miracle run just to get to .500. But yeah.
Yeah. So, but you can't call that a losing season. So that's a great run that can only be beat by the Spurs. So you understand that. you retire Dirk with grace and responsibility, and then you try and build off these draft picks that you get in this year's draft and next year's draft, and hopefully can rebuild a good team that can be competitive and can make the playoffs by the end of the 2010s.
Yeah, agreed.
And then
do you have anything else to add, Nathan, or just yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I think whether you call it tanking or just building for the future, I think I mean, it's still pretty early in the season, but I would probably think around New Year's or as you get closer to February, you're going to see more and more of the younger players take a bigger role and start looking toward the future. But in terms of, I guess, college football, tonight is the Heisman Trophy ceremony. So the finalists were announced this week with Lamar Jackson of Louisville, Deshaun Watson of Clemson, Dede Westbrook of Oklahoma, Baker Mayfield of Oklahoma, and Jabril Peppers of Michigan. So who do you guys think will win, and who you think, I guess, should win?
I guess I'll go first. I think who will win is Lamar Jackson, just because he's been the front runner for pretty much almost this entire season. He has had Heisman moments, specifically when he threw the last second touchdown pass. I believe the seventh, their seventh game. I can't remember the specific team that it was against. But I will go so far as to say that Lamar Jackson probably does deserve the award. It's hard to really point out anyone else. I mean, Deshaun Watson arguably should have won last year, and going into this year, he was supposed to be the front runner going in as the preseason favorite. But this past year, he's had a very up and down season. He was able to turn it around a bit at the end, but even then wasn't on the same level as what Lamar Jackson was able to produce for pretty much for pretty much what Lamar Jackson had been doing almost this entire season. Jabril Peppers would be like an interesting choice, but I don't think he's been able to produce as much. And not only that, he actually has some holes in his game that might affect him once he actually makes it to the pros. And I couldn't care less about the either Sooners players, even though mad respect to them. Good. They did a good job producing and doing their job. But I mean, Dede Westbrook was good, but not. I wouldn't say he was Heisman worthy. I mean, he did great against Texas, but I'm not going to give someone the Heisman just because they did well against the Texas defense this year. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't have much of an opinion on
go ahead.
on Heisman candidates. If it's not the Texas football team, then it's kind of foreign to me. But I've seen Lamar Jackson play. I think he's going to be all the experts are picking him, and I want to be on the. I don't want to be against the grain, so I guess I'll also pick Lamar Jackson. The one thing I do want to say. I think it's a shame that D'Onta Foreman. Good for him that he's elected to go to the NFL. Yeah. But had he be able to stay for next year, it'd be interesting to see what Tom Herman could do to make him a more potential Heisman candidate had he stay next year.
Yeah. So, I mean, he still won the Doak Walker, so that's nothing to dismiss. So.
Yeah, but it's all about the Heisman's, baby.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. Well, I mean, Cedric Benson was able to get the Doak Walker and still go in the top 5. So.
Yeah, and then there's other players like Reggie Bush who won a Phantom Heisman and ended up flaming out.
Yep.
But yeah, I just think that D'Onta Foreman is going to have a decent career. It's just a shame he didn't get any finalist picks in the Heisman just because the team was so mediocre this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Nathan?
Yeah. So for me, I think Lamar Jackson will win, but to be honest, I would voted for Deshaun Watson. I think he's been a little under the radar. Actually, he's had a really good year statistically. 37 touchdowns, only 15 interceptions. He's been he won the head-to-head matchup with Lamar Jackson in that crazy game with all those turnovers. But and his team is number 2 in the country. And so if you want to reward the record and how well the team does. But I do think Lamar Jackson did have more Heisman moments. He had those highlight jumping over people, hurdling.
Yeah.
So I think, but I do think those two losses at the end of the year, to the blowout loss to Houston and to Kentucky,
the last second loss to Kentucky,
yeah, I do think those hurt his candidacy, but we'll see what happens tonight. I guess final thing, we'll have some shout outs here. I guess for me, tonight is the MLS Cup, and it's going to be in Toronto against Toronto FC against the Seattle Sounders. And so if you're flipping around tonight, it's on Fox, and it should be a great game. Toronto, these are two teams that, since they've joined MLS, have not won anything. They've had great fan bases year after year. The support has always been there, but the teams have always been very mediocre. And so one of these teams gets to hoist the trophy tonight. And so Toronto has a stadium that holds 30,000 people. And so it's going to be a great atmosphere. And so if you're curious, put that on Fox tonight.
Another game that's going on tonight, Texas Longhorns basketball team is playing Long Beach State at 5 o'clock on ESPN2. We'll see if Texas can bounce back from their 3-point loss from on Michigan on Monday, which I wish we had time to talk about, other than Eric Davis needs to be better. Shaq Barrett needs to be better. Tevin Mack needs to not be the only good player on that team. So let's see if they can bounce back against. Let's see if we can bounce back against Long Beach State, who has not won an away game this year.
Yeah, for sure. This Texas team needs to grow up fast. And the sophomores, specifically Kerwin Roach and Eric Davis, need to start setting the pace for everyone else, so that they can everyone can start like pushing themselves to elevate their game. But and you had one more shout out, Evan, right?
Yeah. So it's not as much of a shout out, but a rest in peace to minor leaguer Yorman Landa, who played in the Minnesota Twins organization. He died yesterday, a car accident in Venezuela. So he was only 22 years old. So condolences to his friends and family. It always hurts losing somebody, especially someone who had such a promising career coming towards them. And it tends to happen for some reason. Happens a lot in baseball. You had the Nick Hart thing about 10 years ago. You had Oscar Taveras, and obviously Jose Fernandez earlier this year. So it's just really sad to hear about, and I never like these stories, but I just wanted to note about that.
Definitely. Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you. Yeah. And thanks for stopping by, Evan. And that wraps things up. Y'all have a great week out there. Yeah, cool.
Thank you.